Now, from the News Channel 5 network, this is Medical Mondays.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Medical Monday. I'm Carrie Sharp. Tonight's topic I know is something that all of us have dealt with, and maybe even once a week. Headaches, specifically migraines. That's what we're talking about tonight. If you have questions about headaches that you're dealing with or a family member is dealing with, tonight is the night to call. Again, it's your chance to get some free medical advice. Nothing beats that in today's world. So go ahead and give us a call. The number is on the screen. 615-737+ is the number to call. And as always, we are going to get to as many calls as we can tonight because I know that's important to you. Dr. Jan Brandis is our neurologist who is in with us tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.
You see patients in your private practice. Tell folks where that is.
My office is in the 300 20th Avenue building, so I've been there for a long time.
You were saying you've been doing this for 25 years here in town.
This is my 25th year of neurology practice.
Congratulations.
So it's gone by fast.
What made you want to study neurology specifically?
I had a really remarkable neuroanatomy teacher at Vanderbilt when I went a long time ago, Dr. Jeanette Norden, and she's really a neurophysiologist, and she made neuroanatomy so alive. She was one of those people who can teach you everything about the central and peripheral nervous systems and connect it to how it works, the physiology of it, and then she would bring in patients and their families to talk about neurologic disease. And I was totally captivated, and that was it.
And now it's your life's work.
And now it's my life's work.
Over the next hour, and I think everybody at home wants to know, and we want to learn more about headaches. Why do we get headaches? Where does it start?
Well, there are many. I guess you could say it starts if you have a brain. So probably under any set of perfect circumstances you can have a headache, but there are many headaches that are completely benign that happen very infrequently. Probably one that almost everyone's had is an ice cream headache.
Yes.
So the ice cream headache where you get that dollop of cold,
the brain freeze.
The brain freeze. So that's probably the headache that every little person experiences, and grown-ups too. So that would be a very common benign headache. Another one would be cough headache. So if you have the flu or you have an upper respiratory infection and you cough a great deal, you can trigger. It's a completely benign headache. There's nothing wrong inside the brain or inside the skull, but a tremendous amount of coughing can produce headache, and it's because you increase the pressure in your chest when you cough, and that gets transmitted to brain. And again, you have a skull, so you have a closed
there's
object.
nowhere for that pressure to go.
That's exactly right. Another of the so-called benign headaches is one that's really sort of not always people. It's always something that patients will say sort of sheepishly they want to talk about. It's the headache known as coital cephalalgia. It's headache that occurs as one nears orgasm.
Really?
And it can occur in men or women, and it's a pretty breathtaking headache. It's excruciating. So just as orgasm is neared, there's a very tremendous head pain, and it usually is fairly short-lived, though it can last longer. And we do image patients. We get imaging studies of the brains in people who have that particular pattern, but in most studies, about only 1% of patients who have that pattern have anything wrong, and it may come and go just as
everything else does.
So there are a lot of headaches that are really very benign, meaning they don't lead to something else, and those are the ones that many people experience just through
it's just part
lifetime.
Of life. Okay, well, let's talk about the ones that are not benign.
Well, probably the most common headache that occurs worldwide is tension-type headache. It used to be called tension headache because it traditionally is a headache that goes around as a band around the head and is usually in the front, temples often in the back.
Yeah, so you think you're tense and you're furrowing your brow and you're tight in your shoulders, that kind of headache, right?
That's exactly right. So that often gets labeled. They used to call it tension headache, stress headache. It goes by a lot of different names. The really approved name for that is tension-type headache.
Okay.
And it's always both sides of the head. Rarely is it extremely severe, but it can be aggravating because it's mild to moderate, can go on for a long period of time, days to weeks. Usually there's not light and sound associated unpleasantness with it, and it's the kind of headache where after you've been under the studio lights for a long time, if you have that, you might go home, put on your tennis shoes, run for a while, and then that headache would usually get better. So it's one of the rare forms of what is called primary headache, which gets better with physical activity.
Interesting.
So that's the most common one worldwide, and it's considered a primary headache, meaning that the headache is the problem itself. It's not a sign of something underneath. The primary headache that takes most people to physicians or to nurse practitioners or PAs, that takes them into emergency rooms, is usually migraine. So I've told the medical students I work with, now remember, I'll be coming back to haunt you if you ever label a headache that you see in the emergency department as being migraine, because it would be very rare if you label it as a tension type headache.
Oh, I gotcha.
Because tension type headache does not appear in emergency settings because it's traditionally not severe enough. So migraine is the headache that is the most common that appears in medical settings.
For people who have not had a migraine, I've only had one in my life, and I'm thankful to only have had one. It was after I got my wisdom teeth pulled. Whew, Lordy. But for people who have not had one, explain what the symptoms are. They are severe.
They can be very severe, and of course people can have milder ones, but let's take the example that most people know. So migraine without aura, which means just the headache component, when it starts, location doesn't help you. So for many people, the headache will begin as a mild pain. It can move to moderate pain, and then it can get very severe. So it can be in any location. 60% of the time, a migraine attack is on one side of the head. So about 60% of the time, it's one-sided. That means, of course, that 40% of the time it's both, so you can't always rely on that. But one-sided in many cases, moderate to severe. It's throbbing or pulsing, so people will sometimes say they feel it like their heartbeat.
Right.
And then last but not least, and this is probably the critical differentiating feature between migraine and tension type headache, is that the headache is made worse with routine activity. So for you, that would be being here doing what you're doing with the light and sound. But for others, it might be bending over to tie your shoe. It might be walking up a flight of steps. It might be picking something, reaching down to plug a computer cord in. Those are routine activities, not exertion, just routine activities make that headache worse. If people have two of those four, so one-sided, moderate to severe, throbbing or pulsing, and worse with routine activity, two of those meet criteria for the headache of migraine. And then the associated features for that are light and sound sensitivity, the so-called photophobia, phonophobia, the fear of or the unpleasant perception of sound.
Yes.
Nausea and or vomiting. So they only have to have really one of that set. So it's easy to see why, if you happen to be someone who has headache on both sides in the front, and it's, let's say, moderate to severe, both sides, worse when you bend over, triggered by a change in the barometric pressure, and maybe you just have some light and sound sensitivity, you don't vomit. What would you suspect that headache might be labeled as?
I would say migraine. But
well, that's because you're knowledgeable. Many people,
I've been listening.
many people, exactly. Many people would say that's a sinus headache.
Really?
So
because the bending forward, the pressure.
Forward in the, triggered by the barometric pressure. So migraine is not, location does not help us in migraine. So migraine can be here, it can be the back of the head, often labeled again as tension or stress. Sometimes it gets those different labels based on location, but it's really based on the quality of the headache and the associated features.
Gotcha. See, we're all learning something today. Again, if this is striking a chord with you, if you have a question, you need to go ahead and give us a call. 615-737-PLUS. We do have some phone lines open, so give us a call. We'll line those up during the break, and when we come back, we'll get right to them. Stay with us. More Medical Monday next.